Hey Tim, how are you, bud? Hey Tim. How are you? Good. How are you? Ready?
Aiden, are you ready? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the August 17th meeting of the Westborough Planning Board. We have several items on the agenda. We have a minor modification to the special permit number 18-2 at 139 Turnpike Road. We have an informal discussion of the proposal for zoning bylaw change with Attorney Joe Jenkins. We have a presentation, a discussion and a Q&A session with representatives of the Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee. Joe, I want to move that up to second so we can get the CPA members out of here earlier, if that's okay. And then we'll take you third. We have an update on the construction schedule for Village Commons that we're going to take that up at the next meeting, so we won't take that up tonight. And we need to appoint 2 planning board reps, 1 to capital expenditures, 1 to Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, and we'll get a master plan update. So let's start with the 139 Turnpike Road modification to special permit. And if you could just name and title for the record.
Sure, Dan Feeney. I'm a civil engineer at Bales & Thomas, here representing Torrington Properties tonight.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, thank you. So the project was originally permitted probably about 1.5 years or so ago, and it had two-way traffic through most of the site. There was one-way traffic around the proposed Burger King and in front of the 3 buildings. Starbucks has opened. The other buildings, as far as I know, have not opened yet. But there's some concerns with the traffic flow at the site. So in order to address that, the proposal is to make the entire site one way. So you could still come in and out from both entrances, but everything would be in a counterclockwise direction to better accommodate the traffic flows that the site's seeing just from the Starbucks that's out there now. So in order to accomplish that, there is some curbing revisions that are needed to just provide adequate turning radiuses and access through the site. So anywhere on the plan where it's the orangish red color, that's where additional impervious area is being proposed, where there's currently a grassed open space surface. And then the green areas are where impervious area would be converted to open space area. So, and one of the things that is noteworthy about the project, the existing site prior to the redevelopment of it was an existing non-conforming as it relates to open space. The requirement in the zoning district is 60% open space, and the existing open space was around 38%. So the project proponent at the time did get the relief necessary to maintain that same level of open space. So when we were looking at these revisions, we didn't have a ton of play with where we could convert open space to impervious. We had a little bit of wiggle room and still maintain the existing, or I'll call it the pre-existing conditions, open space. So by doing what we've done, we've added a larger landscaped island up in here. You know, that's the benefit of maintaining and meeting the open space that's required at the site. It's also a visual barrier, more than just a sign as drivers drive in off of Lyman Street, that they do need to make a right-hand turn and circle around the site in a counterclockwise direction. And then again, to gain a little bit of extra open space, we did extend the island here. This was always one-way traffic in this direction. Because there's no vehicles that can exit out this way now, there's more room for a vehicle to make a turn around that intersection or that corner right there. So those are the proposed physical changes. Oh, I should note too, At the request, I believe, of the town, sidewalks were added in the back, and that's only noteworthy, again, for the open space calc. We wanted to make sure that we took the information that had been submitted to the town as part of the as-built review of the project and captured anything that had changed since that as-built review, so that we're verifying that what we're modifying would not make the project non-compliant in regards to the open space.
What about signage?
Yeah, so there is signage proposed that would be updated to reflect these new changes. So, and it's kind of a two-pronged thing. There's some pavement markings that would be implemented, and some of them are similar to the pavement markings that were originally proposed in terms of identifying Burger King and Starbucks drive-through lanes, but arrows on the ground to note the one-way nature. Again, this was always one-way through here, but this parking lot would have some pavement markings, as well as some signage on the light poles out there to indicate the one-way nature. You know, I think at first when drivers come in, they might not realize they can't, so there'll be signage all along the building and along the eastern side of the property here to indicate that it's a one-way, as well as the pavement markings. And then there's the original signage that was proposed out at the site. We've marked up on this plan to show how it would need to be modified to be consistent with the current proposed traffic through the site. So, you know, where you see the numbers on the site is where the signages are located and correspond over here. So some of them have no changes, like where you're coming and exiting onto Route 9, the signage is still the same, so that vehicles coming down here know they can make a right to get to Route 9 West, and if they want to go back to Lyman Street, they can go this way. Other ones have significant changes to the signage, including, you know, sign 6 here directing people, you know, all traffic must come in this way. And then vehicles that want to stay in the site go through the bypass lane. So there are significant signage updates, and I can go through them all. If you have any questions on them, I can address it, but they've all sort of had some sort of modification. Some of them get eliminated, or one side of the signage. So for example, sign 2, there won't be cars coming this way anymore under the new circulation plan, so that side of the sign would be eliminated. There wouldn't be any language on it, but we would still maintain the other side of the sign so that people knew to make a left here. So it's a double-sided sign. If you're looking, you know, towards the north, it directs you to the Starbucks and the Burger King drive-throughs. If you're coming, well, you wouldn't be coming this way, so there'd be no signage on that side of the sign.
Any other questions, Hazel?
And I will just add that we met at the site with Mr. Robbins and the town engineer to go through all these changes, and then submitted the plans for review prior to coming to the planning board.
Tim, any questions?
No.
Jim?
Did you ask me? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I'll get to you, Jim. I'm just going to see if these guys.
The only question, I'm sorry, Peter, you can go. Okay,
Jim, go ahead.
on sign 6, you know, all traffic straight ahead, should it not say all traffic turn right?
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. I was looking at that earlier. I think the idea is because the arrow will point that way, the thought was straight ahead, but
Straight ahead's confusing.
The traffic would want to turn right there, you're right. So I think
Right turn only,
right turn only would probably be the better on that
like the
one.
giant plywood sign says now.
Yes, the fancy plywood
Yeah,
sign.
I think straight ahead will confuse people.
Yeah, I agree.
That was the only comment.
And then you see at number 3, are the line markings on the road going to continue there?
Yeah, no, this plan is only for the update of the signage. I should have mentioned that. This was a plan that was done by another consultant that we didn't have the CAD file for. So, but they had done the signage plan initially. So this is just for the updated signage. All the pavement markings would be per the other plan that I looked at earlier here.
Yeah, so my question is right there, so does that, the street marking end right, you know where number 3 is on another page, so we're getting up to the drive-through?
Yep.
Or is that, I think that line should be extended. I feel like that's probably where you're gonna get your big bottleneck, right? Because you're having traffic from both, you know, establishments coming in that one direction.
You think this line should be extended this
Dash line.
Yeah, exactly.
You mean the dash line, right?
Yeah.
Keep the dash line going around that turn.
Yeah.
That separates the two drive-throughs, the red dash line. on the
Yeah, we can look at extending that a little bit further. It's just where we ended, sort of. Anywhere we ended, it's going to be a little awkward because, you know, even the Starbucks, it's almost like three lanes there. It's the Starbucks order, there is the pass-through lane through the Starbucks, and then there's the Burger King and, you know, ultimately the exit from the site. But we can extend that I think probably the best place is up to the order window, would probably be the best place to extend it to.
That makes sense to me.
Tim, did you have something?
Yeah, my understanding is the traffic congestion is caused in part or substantially by the ordering queue to the outdoor signs and backup that occurs from there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think there is some of that from the ordering queue, and I think some of it before some of the temporary measures were put in. There was the competing traffic from the people coming, you know, northbound to get into the Starbucks and people coming off of Lyman Street and trying to make a really acute angle turn there, and that was causing a lot of the problems.
Okay, so my understanding from what you said just a moment ago was that all traffic would be one way counterclockwise around the site. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can enter and exit off of Lyman and Route 9, but once you get into the site, all traffic would be counterclockwise.
Okay, well, there's arrows on the map with the signs that show traffic moving in a clockwise direction along the building on the east side.
Tim, we just went through this. He didn't have the CAD file to change this one. If you look,
Okay, as long as it's one way.
Yeah. So this plan is everything that has to do
arrows in
with
the right direction.
the site design. This other plan is solely for the signage. So these arrows are a remnant of the original plan. So the only thing that this plan is used for is for the signage. So sign 3, sign 2, sign 1, all the way through sign 7. For the actual improvements to the site, whether it be modifications to the curbing, pavement markings, directional arrows, anything like that, we're using this plan. This is the updated plan. I know it's confusing. I wish we had a better way to do it, but we just couldn't get access to the files.
So the signage is going to be off to the right, correct? There's nothing going to be in the middle of the road separating the lines?
Yeah, so the signage will be on these boxes are the sign locations.
Yeah, so my question is, when you're separating, when we have like a crosswalk, you have one of those signs pretty much separating, well, it's not separating anything, but it's in between the roads, so you can see it, but do we want a sign that's separating the traffic out so it says Starbucks this way, like in the middle of the road?
Well, I think the pavement markings are intended to do that. But
Yeah, we're going to put that on the pavement.
Was consideration given to the parking spaces on the east side of that building? I think you're going to still run into huge problems when Burger King opens with traffic queuing to the drive-through order station. And all of those parking spaces on the east side of the structure are, anybody parking, trying to get in and out of them, are going to be blocked by cars waiting to go through the drive-through queue.
Yeah.
Did you give consideration to eliminating those and bringing the traffic up on that side of the building?
Are you saying over on this side?
Not all of them, but the ones abutting the building.
Yeah, I think that when the Burger King opens, they have a fairly significant queue over, separated from the site. I don't think you'll see that queue back. We'll have to wait until the Burger King opens. When the original traffic study was done by the traffic engineer, they had gone out and investigated other Burger King sites, for the purpose of seeing how much queuing there is at other Burger
Okay.
Kings.
Well, I can even take Burger King off the table. If you look at the Starbucks queue, you could barely have 4 vehicles, and it's going to impede the pinch point there at the northeast corner of the building.
Yeah, I think, the last space is an ambulatory space, so you're likely not to have a vehicle there. The other spaces, I don't think the developer would want to give them up unless it was absolutely necessary.
I don't know if they can based on parking requirements, so.
The zoning isn't the issue. They do have access for zoning requirements, but for practical purposes, the number of employees and customers at the site, I think, they're
Front parking lots already full with Starbucks.
yeah, they're tight on parking without giving up more parking. So, I think, again, once those other businesses open, it'll become evident how they complement each other in terms of, the Starbucks obviously is busiest in the morning, but fairly busy throughout the course of the day. Burger King will be mainly a lunch and dinner drive-through traffic, and the urgent care is a lot of evenings and weekends and things like that. So, we'll see how it works out.
Okay. I wanted to give Jim Robbins a turn, and then I had some comments and questions. So, Jim, did you have anything to add?
So as Dan said, we did review this on site several times, and the first time the building commissioner and economic development director was there, along with yourself, Mark. And we looked at the existing conditions, thought about a proposal, then had Dan come out. Dan provided an engineered plan that you have in front of you now. It was in a more conceptual phase, and myself and the town engineer went out with him. You should have in your package an email from the town engineer saying that she is in agreement with this proposed plan. However, I do think some of the comments that were made this evening should be added to the plan as Dan has offered to do. Extending the lane, dashed line to keep people in line to the correct drive-up window, I think is important. But I think the major component of this that is superior to the original plan is the pavement markings. Because think of it, when you're driving through a parking lot, if you see a logo on the pavement, you're going to know where you belong. And having them side by side with the Starbucks on the inside and Burger King on the outside, I think will sift traffic early before they approach the order board to avoid confusion. Changing the traffic from two-way to one-way only on the east side, I think will make a major improvement to the site. Not allowing traffic to be able to exit from the ordering side of the site, which would be the north side of the site, onto Route 9 will also be a major component. If you're interior to the parking area, you can exit onto Route 9 westbound, which is good. But if you're on the other part of the parking lot, say the east side or the north side, you'll have to go around the building like the circulation was intended. And that's the only way to avoid conflicts. It's a very tight site. It does need zoning, but it's very tight. And I think also the suggested changes to the signage this evening are also very good. And so, Dan, what I'd like you to do is, if the board approves this evening, which I'm recommending they do, maybe make the changes to the signage and to the striping on the pavement, send the evening plan, keep the date the same. We'll note that in this evening in the minutes and in the vote. I do have a question, though. Dan, do you know if the property owner has an idea when they would execute this work? That's key, because I really think that the Burger King should not open until this new proposal is in place, executed.
I don't know their exact schedule, but I know they were anxious to be able to meet with the planning board so they could institute the changes. So I think it is, something they want to do quickly, but I don't know, if they have, the contractor still out there and lined up to do this right away.
Okay, so that's a difference. To my knowledge, the applicant has not applied for CO at this point, but I think that the board needs to give that consideration, the timing of the Burger King occupancy and the timing of the execution of this new circulation plan.
Yeah, Jim, you anticipated one of my questions. I'm concerned about the other two businesses opening before this is done and having further construction go on while those businesses are open. And I'm just wondering if we can make that a condition of this motion to require this work to be done before the building commissioner issues occupancy.
Well, obviously occupancy is based upon their completing the plan and safety on the site. It's usually to the building. We have the building commissioner here. You can ask him that question.
So if this were approved, Fred, would you require this to be done prior to occupancy of the other two units?
Thank you. Further Naro, Building Commissioner. Well, I can't condition that. I mean, the board can certainly do that. I think I wouldn't have as much argument about Convenient MD opening. Burger King would be tougher because of that. The way the radius is now, you basically run into the people coming through the Burger King drive-through, making that right-hand turn. So there would be some benefit to making that change prior to the C of O for the Burger King.
So you would need us to include that in our motion?
Yeah, because I don't know that I have full authority to hold them up on that.
All right, so let's,
It's kind of unfortunate that the property owner is not here to hear some of this conversation, too. But, you know,
well, we'll just have to work without them. So I did have a couple of comments. You know, I think the biggest problem on the site was traffic entering from Lyman Street on the northwest entrance, headed down to try and get into the drive-through lane. It just wasn't physically possible for a car to make a right-hand U-turn and get into that lane, even without any cars in that queue. They had to go down, pull into a space, and turn around and try and get to that Starbucks order window. So I think that the traffic, you know, counterclockwise change is a beneficial change, and I think that even the temporary signage, we've seen improvement on the site. The other issue was, you know, traffic backed up from the Starbucks ordering queue into that east parking space, rather than leaving the southerly travel lane, so to speak, open so that people, you know, could do two-way traffic. People waiting for Starbucks would queue up on the westerly side of that parking lot, and other cars would go around them on the right. So they were essentially making two travel lanes going north with no travel lanes going south. So when somebody came from that Lyman Street entrance, they would just face two vehicles heading towards them. So I think, again, the counterclockwise traffic motion will help. But I guess my question is, when you look at the CAD that you inherited, if you could put that back up for a second? No, the one with the...
the signage.
Yeah, the one with the signage. If you look at this model, the ordering speaker, so to speak, I don't know what you call it, but is right at the bend. And there's room for 3 or 4 cars to queue before it gets to the parking lot. So if somebody stops there to order. But in reality, I think it's much closer to, if you put the other one up, I think it's closer to the other corner of the building. And am I wrong on that?
Looks like it's
Yeah.
here.
So I think what happened was you really now are only leaving 1 or possibly 2 cars before that queue backs up into the parking lot. If somebody stops to order and somebody's directly behind them, that second car is almost blocking the parking lot, you know, the travel lane already. Again, I'm not sure we need to make a change in the location of the ordering speaker, but if it continues to be, I guess my biggest concern is if that queue backs up all the way to Route 9, because when we originally approved this site, we were told that wouldn't happen. But if that ordering queue at high volume times gets all the way back to Route 9, that obviously will be an issue. So I just think we need to monitor that and see if that ordering speaker needs to be moved so that more cars can queue. Other than that, I'm happy with the signage. I think, again, it's a tight site. I don't think there's going to be much more you can do to improve it. I don't. I think those parking lots that Tim was worried, or those parking spaces that Tim was worried about, I think, you know, people in line will be courteous and they'll see that somebody's ready to back out. It could be necessary to make those angle spaces. I don't know if that's feasible, but again, I'd like to just see what happens and then maybe revisit it down the road if it's still a problem and people are, you know, we see it all the time on West Main Street where somebody's backing out of a space and people just stop and let them back out. So I think that's what'll happen in that parking lot, and I think it'll be okay. Again, it won't be great, but it'll be okay. So those are my comments. I think you've done a good job in trying to solve it. So go ahead, Jim.
We'll follow up your comments. I'm there almost every day, and people do stop and let people back out. And this right turn has been much better. The one additional comment I thought of is right now there are not people waiting in the Burger King line in that right-hand lane. So you've got a red stripe on here that shows, you know, should that stripe go further back all the way to the island that makes it clear when people are coming around to go to the drive-through window that they're aware there's a lane next to them for pass-through traffic? You know, if you came in that way, you understand that. But if you come in from Route 9 eastbound, westbound, and you go around and you're not familiar, you may not be aware that that's 2 lanes along Lyman Street. So should that red line on the pavement go all the way back to the island, or at least the turn, so people understand stay to the left as you're going to get your food at the Burger King window? People will be coming by your right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's possible, to take this line back and just back to the
delineate
curve.
2 lanes to
Yeah.
where they come around the corner and see it.
Yeah, I think that probably makes sense to bring it back at least to the midpoint of the curve here, because that's where, you know, your drive-through traffic, you get your order board, they're going to be coming from here.
You know,
and
maybe
this
on
is
the
where
right
they're
side you
gonna
put a through traffic sign, on the left side you put a Burger King sign.
be. Yeah.
So that,
Even pavement markings would be.
or the pavement.
Yeah, I think the pavement markings, because, you know, all of the traffic that gets into the Burger King drive-through, you know, if they come in off of Lyman Street, are going to need to come.
They've already gone around. I'm saying
the
if
side,
you come up from
yeah.
the other side, you may not be
Yeah.
aware of that. So
Yeah.
just, it's certainly working well with that change.
Yeah.
And people are patient, but that's with one business open. So hopefully it persists. That was my only other comment.
All right. Anything else from the board?
I guess the only other comment, I guess, on the timing of occupancy, and I have no idea what their timing is for occupancy when the work on Burger King would be done. I just don't know the lead time on the signage. I don't know if they've already ordered it on the hopes that this would be approved, or where they're at in that thing. So, you know, I don't know if temporary signs could be used, like, you know, so the condition would be that all of the curbing modifications would need to be made, you know, all of the pavement markings would need to be made, and at least temporary signage or something acceptable to the building inspector, something along those lines. And it may be a non-issue. It may be that the signs can be turned around in a week or so. I just don't know.
Fred, can you answer that question? If we make it subject to signage, would you let them put up temporary signs until the permanent signs? Would that satisfy, or do you need us to include that in any kind of motion?
Yeah, sure. The previous owner had asked me about temporary signs. I'll work with them on that. So if they have to make something up just to get by until they get the permanent signs, that shouldn't be an issue, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, because I understand a lot of materials are back ordered, the signs might take a while, but,
Yeah, I think the key is that you get the medians of the aisles straightened out so the traffic flow will work, because that cardboard sign's not going to, or that plywood sign's not going to work
We got a
permanently.
plywood sign there at the moment.
Yeah, that's the thing directing traffic, but
well, clearly the reconfigured island will help with that, but some temporary signage and pavement markings, I think, will reinforce that, so
absolutely. And may I make one other comment while I'm standing here?
go ahead. Brett.
I would request that the board ask that we get a complete as-built once the work's done, including a voting table to reflect the changes, so I can capture that and the history of that.
Okay. You need that as part of the motion or just instruction?
That's in the current special permit. Do you want him to put it in the motion again?
Well, because they've already submitted an as-built is the issue, so we've already accepted the
Oh, I see. Yeah, it makes sense, and you should put it in the motion. A current as,
You can add a sentence to the motion.
Because the open space changes, I want to make sure we capture them in the future, so you understand that.
so it should be an as-built that reflects the new amendment.
Question for the building commissioner is this notion of pavement marking and paint, is that part of an as-built along with signage? I'd certainly like to have seen it.
Well, we can certainly add that as the final as-built. The pavement markings are kind of a one-off or an anomaly because normally you're not allowed to use directional signs with logos. But in this particular project, it was presented from the get-go, and I'm not sure how else you would do that. That's why the freestanding signs, if you will, only have the name of the occupant as opposed to the logos and stuff. So that was kind of the trade-off. So yes, I mean, if you'd like to have that captured in the as-built, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
I would.
Didn't we also have a discussion about some sort of pathway marking from the parking over to the doorway of Starbucks?
Say that again, Hazel, I'm sorry.
I thought at one point, excuse me, we had a discussion about putting some sort of a pedestrian walkway in the pavement over from the parking lot to the entrance of Starbucks, just so people would be aware that people were crossing from the parking to go actually physically into the store.
Yeah, I'm just not sure where you'd put that.
I'm not sure either, but
I mean, it's all the way, there is one across the drive-through.
we did have a discussion about.
We did have a discussion about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is one across the drive-through. I see that that goes between Burger King and Starbucks. But I don't see anything I'm not sure where you could put that because you'd basically lead from the sidewalk into one of the parking spaces. There's really no.
I know, I mean, as I said, that was one of the complaints that people actually had as far as that parking lot went.
So just a thought, one of the problems with that would be, say that you just, for example, added a crosswalk from the island that's in front of Starbucks to the parking field along Route 9, so on the south side of the site on Route 9 westbound. If you were parked all the way on the west side of the site, how would you get to that crosswalk? So I don't think there's any really good place or appropriate place for a crosswalk in that part of the parking field.
I feel like it's intuitive when you're in a parking lot that you're watching for people coming and going from their cars.
Yeah, there is a stop sign at the end of the drive-through lane.
Each one.
It just was a comment some people have made to me that we're trying to get into the Starbucks store versus, when they park their car, so I'm just raising.
I'm just not sure where you could put it though, Hazel.
Yeah.
I
No,
understand your point.
I agree, but
All right. Any other comments, questions before we go to a motion? Anybody want to tackle this motion? I can try. The board finds that proposed modification is consistent with the provisions of the existing special permit 18-2 for 139 Turnpike Road, and that the modification is minor in nature, being within the scope and conditions of the approved special permit. Therefore, a public hearing is not required. The proposed modification furthers the town intent to provide safe access and circulation within the project site. I move that the planning board approve the site modification plans entitled 139 Turnpike Road, Westborough, Mass., sheets 1 and 2, and also the plan entitled Directional Signage Plan and Elevations, 139 Turnpike Road, Westborough, Mass., revised 9/5/2018, and further revised by Beals and Thomas Incorporated on August 2nd, 2021, sheet SN-10. Further move that the changes discussed tonight will be incorporated into the final as-built plan and presented to the town building commissioner and town planner. All right, there was one other thing, remind me.
No, I think you got it. I think you got it.
Oh, yeah, and finally, my motion includes instructions to the building commissioner to not issue the certificate of occupancy for the Burger King until these changes have been met to the satisfaction of the building commissioner.
Second that.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? That is 5-0 in favor. Jim. Okay. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the time and effort on this, and hopefully we'll see some improvement. All right, next I'm going to ask the members of the Cpa Exploratory Committee, of which I am a member, to come up, introduce themselves. I will start by saying you were all given a copy of the presentation. There were several meetings on this where that presentation was presented, and we're really just asked for a few minutes of the board's time to give you a chance to ask questions, make sure that you understand what the CPA is and what the CPA Exploratory Committee is trying to accomplish. I will, Jen and Leah, if you could just state your name and introduce yourselves for the record, and then I'll let you add any comments.
So thank you for having us tonight. My name is Jen Doherty. I'm the chair of the CPA Exploratory Committee.
And I'm Leah Talbot. I'm the finance director for the town of Westborough, and I'm also a member of the committee.
And so as Mark said, we've been working since November on sort of exploring CPA, looking at how it works, how it might work in Westborough, if Westborough should consider adopting it. We had a board and commission information session, 2 sessions, back at the end of June. And so I think I had sent that to Kristen, was hoping that you would all be able to watch that. So we weren't looking to give the full presentation again tonight, but did just kind of want to get an idea of the planning board's thoughts on CPA, answer any questions that you might have. Obviously, if we do recommend that Westborough adopt CPA and Westborough goes forward with it, a planning board member would sit on the Community Preservation Committee that does oversee the funds, so you would be directly involved in how it's administered here in Westborough. So any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them.
Go ahead, Jim.
I'm curious what the general feedback, it seems logical to me, but I'm curious what the general feedback you've received so far from different people who've listened to it, or if you've got feedback from townspeople as they've had an opportunity to see it.
Mm-hmm. We haven't received too much feedback yet. We've done, we presented to the select board. We did the 2 board and committee presentations. We've met with some other boards as well, and it's been generally positive. We haven't had, really a lot of pushback. I think our main point of feedback was that people were looking to go higher with the number, which was interesting to us, but we haven't really heard too much against it yet. So
one of the things I wanted to make clear to everybody that, in case you weren't clear on that, the exploratory committee is just going to make a recommendation. The Board of Selectmen will have to vote to proceed with that recommendation. If they do vote to proceed with that recommendation, it would have to go to town meeting, and if it passes at town meeting, it has to go to the ballot. So there'll be quite a bit of scrutiny on this before anything becomes official, and I think that's important from a transparency standpoint.
What's your timeline, Jen?
So right now, we were looking at if we do make a recommendation in favor of it, that it would go on the warrant for the spring annual town meeting. The Community Preservation Coalition, which is a statewide nonprofit that kind of, promotes CPA in Massachusetts, they generally recommend that communities put it on a federal election ballot because that tends to have the highest rate of success. State is a little less successful, and local elections are really not successful. It's just the difference in voters that come out for those 3 elections and the difference in turnout, obviously. Obviously, if we wanted to put it on a federal election, we'd be waiting another 4 years at this point. Next November, there is a governor's election at least. So we'd hope that that would at least kind of boost the state turnout a little bit. So we were trying to, stay away from the sort of local spring elections at the very least.
So you'd like to try to get it on a year from now, essentially 2022?
Essentially, yes, the 2022 November ballot is what it would be. So we're looking to ultimately, hopefully, make some kind of a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, this December, to kind of, if our recommendation is yes, it gives them some time before they need to make decisions about the warrant in the spring, if they want to have any meetings about it or anything like that before they place it on the warrant, have it on the warrant for a spring town meeting, and then it would go on the ballot for a November election.
In your opinion, why does it not do well in the local election compared to,
I don't know. They just, I think, the federal election, I think they say it's like 3/4 of the, ballot questions end up passing. But when it's a local election, it's way less for whatever reason. I don't know if it's just the people that turn out for a local election or that there's just less of a turnout in general. But that's what the coalition recommends, so that's what we were trying to aim for, but obviously we're not going to aim for a federal election at this point, so.
I think from my viewpoint, we want an election with a higher voter turnout just so that more voters have a say in the decision rather than, that's one of the reasons it's going to the ballot and not just town meeting, because town meeting is generally not all the voters.
What's the history of the CPA in Westborough? My understanding is this has come up before and been
It's
rejected.
come up, but it never made town meeting. It was discussed. I believe the selectmen decided not to put it on the ballot.
Yeah, so it seems that the CPA itself is based on an early real estate transfer tax program that had been used on Cape Cod. And it seemed that there was an attempt to kind of bring something like that to Westborough just before CPA was adopted in early 2000. We did find a warrant article for something related to that, but I believe the article was passed over. I don't think they actually ended up voting on it. And then Jim did say that he remembers himself presenting CPA at some point, but that it didn't actually ever make it to town meeting, like Mark said, so it hasn't really been tested in Westborough, I guess.
Just as an aside to that, Grafton was one of the earliest adopters of CPA, and I believe that they've received over $5 million. Am I right on that?
Yeah, so they adopted it in 2002, and they've received $7.8 million.
Quite a bit more than 5 million. So,
20 years.
Again, one of the features of this program is that all expenditures have to go to town meeting. So if the Community Preservation Committee wants to use some of this money towards a project, town meeting still has a say in the approval of that expense. And presumably it would be something that the town would vote for anyway, like town hall or this building, the Forbes, or some other historical project or housing project or open space. So I think it's a potential way for us to get some contribution from the state to start saving towards the future. towards future, rather than waiting till those projects come up and then trying to find the money. So that's one of the reasons I'm for it, is that I want to get ahead of these projects rather than having to run out and borrow money every time something comes along.
I think the other thing is that the taking it to a larger election, when you have more people there, I think you'll get a better reading on the type of community which people want to build. And people are more interested now in looking at other sources of funding than finding just our own real estate taxes doing the funding. So I think people are more amenable now to realizing there is money out there that can be used for some of the projects. And I think it's important to point out to people that it could have been used for the renovations here. It could have been used for the renovations of the townhouse. We have a new school. We're talking about renovating and increasing the size of the library. So there are a number of projects coming up which this kind of money could be used for. So I think you're going to find a much better reception now that you can point to other communities and say, look what happened in Grafton, or other local communities around us, what they've been able to use their money for. And I think one of the problems that probably failed earlier was that it was too new. They hadn't had a chance to see, communities hadn't had a chance to see what the benefits of something like the CPA are. So I think it's I think this is something that we definitely as a town should do. I feel very strongly about it.
One of the other things it really strikes me about this program is that people in Westborough are already funding this program through, the money comes from the registry fees, right? So every time a house sells in town or somebody files a plan, or, they take some of that money. So we've all put money into that pot and we've gotten none of that back because it's gone to other towns. So I think it's time for us to get at least our fair share. We're not targeting a huge surcharge. I mean, we're trying to be conservative because we recognize fiscal times. We chose the most conservative to focus on. We haven't haven't made a final decision yet, but we're focusing on the lowest possible surcharge and giving exemptions for low income and, as much, making it as palatable as possible for taxpayers. But, again, I can see the sentiment towards even a higher surcharge, but, I think it's better to start small, and if it becomes something we really like, then we can always grow it to a larger surcharge.
Yeah, there is a period of time in which you have to, once you passed it, 5 years before you can raise it, so that it has to sit at the particular level in which you pass it. You can't just raise it every year.
Okay.
I think that's something people need to be aware of.
How people feel about it, I think.
Yeah.
So probably sooner.
Probably next year.
All right. Any other questions? Comments? No. All right. Jen and Leah, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Say that if you haven't.
Jim Robbins, yeah.
Just a question. I assume that it would help your effort if the boards weighed in formally on their support for this. And so are you hoping that the town boards and committees will take a formal vote on this?
Yeah, I think eventually, but I think we'd like to have a better idea of what we're recommending right now.
Okay.
We've just kind of been shopping that 0.5% surcharge, so we don't, want anyone to necessarily vote on something if that's not ultimately what we recommend. So we would eventually, before we make our recommendation to the select board, like if the board is willing to have a letter of support, but I think we'll wait for now.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just encourage you, if you haven't watched the presentation, it is out on the town's website. If you go under the Cpa Exploratory tab, our presentations to the Board of Selectmen and the actual PowerPoint presentation, our minutes are all out there for people to view. So.
The presentation was very clear and I thought was very helpful. Has it gone on Westborough TV yet? They originally recorded, it's up on their YouTube, but I don't know if they're replaying it or anything like that. It might be worthwhile when you get closer to talk to Karen and see whether it could be represented, and also whether perhaps you could do, I know Shelby does this,
I'm going to do that, yep.
done that already?
Yeah, and we're going to, early September, we're going to, yes, I'm going to go on Frank and
But get
Mary,
it
yes.
back up there, I think, maybe on the Westborough TV as you get closer, so that people can reference it. I think that would be helpful.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is an informal discussion of a proposal for a zoning bylaw change with Attorney Joe Jenkins. Joe, thank you for your patience. If you and your colleague could just state your name and...
I'm Joe Jenkins, attorney in Westborough, and I'm Mike Morello from Clear Channel is here to assist me tonight in trying to inform the board about as much information as we can. But I just want to say first is that the room is so impressive. I've been coming, I've never been in this room, and I'm just astounded how aesthetically appealing it is and how huge. Yeah. But first, I'm going to ask Mike to start off the present. Jim asked me to try and give the board an idea about why billboards can be beneficial to a municipality. And so actually Clear Channel put together a little slideshow that's way better than anything I could come up with for sure. And so Mike will walk you through this, and it's in color.
Did you want me to read this to you as I go through? It's only a minute long, there's like 5 slides.
Okay.
Or do you want to just read it as, it's up to you?
All right, I can read it.
I'm sorry?
You don't need to read it
Okay.
aloud. Thank you.
So this is,
So that gives you an idea of how the government and businesses can utilize the visibility. Oh, there's more stuff.
Great, thanks for that.
Thanks, Mike. And also, I put together some papers.
Thank you, Joe.
Oftentimes client free capital. And it turns out, and in here's also a map, and the map shows all the areas that could be affected by the proposal.
Can you give one to Joe?
A map that shows all the areas that would be affected by this proposed zoning change. And if, also in the packet is a warrant, a proposed warrant that sets forth what the town meeting would potentially vote on. So the warrant seeks to define the yellow areas as an area where an electronic billboard, a digital billboard, could be erected. The billboard would also have to be approved by the selectmen, and the benefits that the particular billboard would bring would be subject to the selectmen's approval. Also, there's a lot of state rules that dictate where these billboards can be. But for the purposes of tonight's discussion, we've set forth areas adjacent to 495 with a mast pike and not within 200 feet of a residential area. Now, some of the parcels in yellow are adjacent to the highway, but are also within certain parts of the parcel within 200 feet of a residential area. So for instance, I happen to be looking at the long skinny parcel known as 40 Washington, which is currently the home of many solar panels. And obviously that parcel's too thin to have a billboard, it's too close to residential. But other parcels shown up on the map are much larger and much farther from residential areas and perhaps would be a better candidate for a digital billboard. So this is the map that goes with our proposal, just to give an idea to the planning board about where the parcels are that might be affected. But I guess not by chance, Caruth Capital owns quite a few of the parcels, or at least a half dozen or so. And also many of the parcels that are shown but aren't colored yellow, so they also have an interest as neighbors to these parcels. And Clear Channel has a great experience with the state about how their rules dictate where these billboards can be. Certain, in town, in the past, Clear Channel, for instance, has negotiated with towns and donated an annual linkage fee to municipalities such as Westborough, I believe, right now or already, and also provide certain no-cost messaging on the billboards at the rate of hours per month. And they, in combination with that, also provide to the Mass Department of Transportation and the federal government additional hours of public service advertising at no cost. So those are some of the features that might entice a municipality to invite Clear Channel to construct such a billboard. I would suppose that I would ask you if you, the board, if you have any specific questions for myself or my sign expert, Mike.
Two of these signs, I think, are on Route 9 now, right? On the eastbound side and on the westbound side.
Correct.
Yeah, they've been there a while.
And operating in that manner, I see public service announcements and a variety of different communications coming.
Yes.
Are they both Clear Channel on Route 9? Yeah.
Hazel, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the viewscape, quite frankly, as I drive down 495 and when I drive on the Mass Pike. And I don't remember seeing any of these types of billboards as I drive along. I'm really very skeptical about putting this kind of thing along. I mean, Route 9 is fine because Route 9 has a lot of signs on it, but I really cherish the landscape as I'm driving along 495 where where it's green and driving along the Mass Pike, essentially. So in my own mind, I cannot sort of come across any, maybe as you get closer to Boston there's some, but I don't really remember seeing billboards. And I think that, when interstates were started, it was one of the things that I kind of remembered people talking about, that they didn't want billboards on, that they didn't want it to look like a commercial type of space as you drive along, but more of a scenic view as you drove through various states. So I'm a little concerned about that, and I just, if someone could point to me where, there are a lot of these billboards sitting there, I'm willing to go and look at them, but I visually cannot think to myself where I've seen them on 495 or on 90 in our general area.
I see Fred has his.
Fred, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Fred Lenaro, Building Commissioner. Right, wrong, or indifferent, Cumberland Farms has one. 165 Flanders.
Yeah,
Very-
that's on the Turnpike.
On the Turnpike, that may be, but I'm just visually
So
thinking about, excuse me, the
yeah,
whole.
if you get on the
area.
Turnpike
Yeah.
from 495 going towards Boston, you'll see it on the left side, I think.
Is that, what town is that in? It's not, is.
No, it's Westborough.
It is in
That's
Westborough?
Westborough. Yeah, that was
Oh,
a-
and that's a pre-existing,
Yeah, that was a grandfather.
non-conforming is the reason. Okay, that's,
I understand there's a similar sign in Taunton on the,
Yeah, so on 495, if you go north, Lower Lawrence area, they have digital billboards, and then Taunton, West Bridgewater. So actually, if the bylaws were changed to allow digital and one was granted on 495, this would be the first one in this immediate area. But I took a quick research, if I may, Bob, with this map. Because, like, let's just say the town of Westborough did allow digital, there's a lot of hoops we have to go through at the state level that are a lot more stricter than local level. So based on this map alone, there would be no other digitals allowed on the Mass Turnpike, because where Cumberland Farms is, you have to go 1,000 feet west or east of that existing billboard before you could put another billboard, and you'd be out of the town of Westborough before that happened. So even if, like I said, you did allow the bylaw change, there would be no new billboards on the pike. As far as on 495, I went from Technology Drive all the way south to the pike where it hits 495, and that most likely there'll only be one allowed for that same reason. Like I said, 1,000 feet either stretch. And then, like I said, the state's more stringent where you can't be within 500 feet of an off-ramp or an exit. So like Technology Drive, you couldn't put one up there because of that reason. And you have to have 2 commercial properties within 500 feet of the sign. And then you can't be near residences. So there is probably one spot, like I said, just north of the Mass Pike on 495 where you could put a digital sign. And then once, if that's allowed, there's no other ones for all those other reasons.
so the state rule that requires the 2 commercial properties within 500 feet effectively eliminates the possibility that an electronic billboard would be placed in an undeveloped area.
Likely only be, effectively, we're probably talking about the potential for one additional sign in Westborough.
Correct. And if I may, could I show that video?
Oh, yeah, well, okay, let me just give it a little introduction. So one parcel of land which could be a candidate for an electronic billboard is 155 Flanders Road. And Mike and I thought it might be useful if we sent a drone to this, to show what the view from the top of the sign would be. And that would be an indicator of who could see the top of the sign. And if you take the 360-foot circle, you'll see that it's really a commercial industrial area that would see the sign. Now, they would see the structure of the sign, but it's not likely that they would see the actual graphics, the digital display, because the digital display would be faced towards the traffic, not towards, not in the sign isn't in every direction. It's a V-shaped sign that is directed, focused on the traffic that would be passing by on the Pike or 495. So I think Mike told me this drone took views of 75 and 70 feet.
70 and 65.
70 and 65, which you probably know better, that's the approximate height of the sign, I suppose.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
I'm intrigued by the benefits that I do see all the messages on the signs, like when I'm sitting at the intersection on 9. And I pay attention to the town messages and things, and I do. Town gets the free sign. I don't want 4 or 5 billboards on 495, that's for sure. So That was my first assumption, that you'd have basically an unlimited right to place them, which would concern me. So one side, I'm intrigued by the benefits and the cons. I echo Hazel's point, it's a pretty area that's all landscape, but there is a lot of commercial building. If it was amongst the commercial buildings, it wouldn't bother me as much, so I'm ambivalent. But
Yeah, I think the importance that it's one sign, we're not going to have multiple signs, and there's no potential for another sign. That's my that would be my hang up on it, because I don't want signs to be littered up and down. It doesn't make sense to me.
Can someone explain to me what the benefit is? I mean, quite frankly, I can see it being on Route 9. I don't see,
They've talked a little bit about the benefit.
I know, to me,
it's
I
the
don't see
messaging
much
to me.
of a
I mean,
benefit.
I learn a lot
ads.
about meeting dates and things like that from seeing those signs, I have to admit. So that town messaging is, I don't love them.
No, I mean, the ones on Route 9, I think are great. I mean, and particularly I like the public service message. But what's the point of having one on 495 when people, essentially, that traffic is passing through? I mean, I think,
That's the key. Is it going to draw people in or not?
I can't see
Can I
any
answer?
benefit to the
There's
town.
probably three benefits. One is the public service ads. Two is annual revenue to the town. I believe currently spend close to 25,000. Give 25,000 to the town for the current sign, if I'm not mistaken.
So for the two locations currently in Westborough, we pay $20,000 per location. But for 495, we would offer $50,000 because it's a more,
And that goes to the economic
a
development.
better highway than Route 9, more traffic.
Well, that's not our decision where it goes, I don't
I mean,
think.
that's where it goes.
And then
Yeah.
the third benefit would be advertising opportunities for local.
Yeah, but the thing is, the people, an advertising for a restaurant in Westborough, people speeding through on 495 are not going to get off. I mean, as I
A
said.
lot of people
this is-
are getting off at our exits, though.
That's fine. Yeah, but we've got all the we've got all the signs on
I don't
Route
know, if
9.
Harry's is advertising fried clams, I'm going to get off and eat at Harry's, but that's just because I know it. But,
Yeah,
you know.
but thank you for, yeah.
No, I'm just being comical. Anyway, any other comments? Jim, anything?
No comments.
Okay. So I need a lot more information before I could support this. I feel like the proposed language is pretty simplistic. It doesn't cover a lot of my questions. You've sort of answered those. How many signs could there be? Would there be more than one sign per lot? I mean, obviously not, given the state regulations, but this language really relies on the state regulations to be in place and doesn't give the town any real control if the state regulations change, if they become more relaxed. I'd like to see language built into it that that gives the town control of the zoning on it, and if the state changes, we still have the same restrictions, so that the town could vote to change it to follow the state or leave it in place. Does that make sense?
Yes, so let's just say you allowed a digital billboard every 500 feet. When we go to the state, if there's another billboard within 500 feet, we're going to get denied because their rules are 1,000 feet.
Right, but let's say we pass a bylaw that says, okay, they can only be every 1,000 feet, and then, we pass a bylaw that says it has to follow state regulations, and the state changes the regulations from 1,000 to 500. Now, all of a sudden, we've got 3 or 4 billboards instead of
Right.
one.
I guess you could adopt the state regulations the way they are now.
Well, something similar built into the language of the bylaw is what I'm suggesting, not just relying on the state to protect us, because I don't, no offense, I don't trust the state. I just, things change at state level that maybe have an impact on Westborough that we aren't predicting at this point.
Right, so
I don't see any current language that would say, okay, the billboard has to face 495 or Mass Pike. I don't really want to see a billboard, up towards Olympus from Route 9 that, I mean, I'm not sure exactly where. And I guess the third thing, and the reason, what I would recommend is we have a zoning bylaw subcommittee. I'd like to have them study this a little, see what other towns have something similar, what we're not thinking of, make a recommendation to the planning board on it. More importantly, I'm concerned that because we've really put out there that we're only going to have one eligible, it feels a lot like spot zoning to me, and I just don't know whether it'll pass the Attorney General's litmus test towards equitable zoning. So I'm concerned about that end of it too, and I don't know if Jim could comment on that, or maybe we need to study that more.
So comment on that, and then a question. I don't think it's spot zoning, because the language as presented is very general, and it would be applicable to any of the properties that are adjacent to 495 or the Mass Pike. Where they can locate it is based upon what the state will allow, but your local zoning act would not be considered spot zoning. Joe has shown multiple properties that are adjacent to those two highways. My question is, the state does regulate electronic signs under Chapter 93D, Section 2, and one of the most important aspects of that regulation is the distance from the right-of-way. And Joe, because Joe mentioned earlier that many of the parcels on Washington Street were so narrow, that the depth of the parcel would not allow a sign because of their proximity to residential uses or because of the nature of the parcel being so narrow. Section 2 of Chapter 93 states that no sign can be erected within 660 feet of the nearest edge of the interstate. And so that's going to be quite a distance from the edge of that right-of-way. And I'm wondering what the height of and the size of the sign would need to be visible from 2.5 football fields from the right-of-way of either the Pike or 495. I'm also wondering if the footprint of the sign doesn't end up in a parking lot or on a building roof. That's something, though, for you to overcome. That's not something that we would regulate unless the board felt they didn't want it in a parking lot or on a roof. But based on the drone, and I hadn't seen the drone footage, it's the first time I'd seen it. Based on the drone footage, it looks like you'd probably be in a parking lot or on a roof to meet that regulation. That's just a question.
So along those lines, I'd like to see something in the bylaw that requires any potential sign to analyze view impacts, so that we have a formal study of what the impact would be and who might be affected by that, because I don't want to have a sign go up and then have abutters say, well, that thing is, killing me. And I'm a little nervous about that, so.
Could you comment on Jim's question?
Yes, to comment on that, what those regulations mean is, where 495 meets Route 9? So when they call 495 the major highway, so once 495 meets Route 9, you can't have a sign within 660 feet of that ramp on or off Route 9 from 495.
I'm
That's
looking
what
at
they
the
mean.
act. It doesn't make that. It doesn't make that distinction here. It says the main traveled way of a highway in the interstate or primary systems.
Right, so the location we were looking at does conform to state regs. We have signs all along major throughways. They want them to be adjacent to highways because that's the commuters are who you're looking for. So if it's 500 feet, 50 feet or 100 feet, the property line from, say, 495, you're all set. It's when a major highway comes off of a ramp, so like I said, 495 to Route 9, once that ramp hits Route 9, then you count 660 feet either way. That's what, it might not the way the wording is, but that's what they meant. That's what the regulation is.
Is that the way the state enforces that then?
Yes.
I had one other question. Have you approached any other towns along 495 to put up signs of this type?
Yes, so we have them in Lowell, Lawrence, West Bridgewater, Taunton. I think that's it on 495.
But nothing in between. You see how, I mean, that's a huge gap between, and Lowell and Lawrence are a whole different story than Westborough.
Yeah, so the main reason for that is the median strip between north or south or east or west lanes because of all the trees. We like to have a two-sided sign to get both traffic north and south. And a lot of towns have that median strip where there's a ton of trees, so it's not feasible for us to put a billboard up. And Westborough has a perfect spot where there's no trees in the median, so that's why we approached Westborough.
To be clear, I mean, the way you're wording this, and to address, I think, your issues, Mark, the select board has the right to deny this, the way this is worded. So in terms of considering a given location and what it would look like, they would have the right to deny if they felt that it was going to impact the butters or some, perhaps negatively.
Yeah, the applicant will have the burden of convincing the selectmen that the benefits exceed the detriment as determined by the board. So any applicant will have to go before the board, set forth what the specific benefits of that particular proposal are, whether it be financial or public service announcements, the real estate tax benefit of having an extra structure to tax on the particular lot. And the select board will determine whether that, on the whole of things, that's an attractive proposal or not. So this proposed bylaw would leave that power with the board.
Jim asked the size of the sign. Is it going to be the same size as on Route 9, or are these signs going to be larger? Or?
Correct, 14 feet by 48 feet, two-sided, and that's the industry norm.
All right, any other questions? Joe, are you looking for an answer from us tonight?
We're hopeful to be able to have a proposed warrant to put before the town meeting at their next town meeting. That was our goal.
Okay, so we would have to have a public hearing by,
Probably our second meeting in September, or hold a special meeting for this.
and would they even be able to get it on the warrant? Would it be a,
So there's two ways to get on the warrant. It's actually three ways, but the two most common ways to get on the warrant is that the board sponsors the article and places it on the warrant as a planning board article. The second most common way is to have a citizen petition, and they petition the selectmen, and the selectmen put it on the warrant, and we are required to hold a public hearing and report at town meeting. The third way is to have petition by voters' signature that forces it to be on the warrant. I don't think that's what you want to do. I don't think you want to go that way.
That wasn't something we've spoken about.
Yeah. So you could take the approach that you'll hold the public hearing, and at the public hearing decide whether or not you want it to be your article. And if you choose it to be your article, then it'll appear on the warrant, before the warrant closes, obviously.
well, we don't get to put it on the warrant, the Board of Selectmen do.
Right, you'd have to have it submitted to them before the warrant closes, and they would choose to put it on the warrant or not. Or you could hold the public hearing and decide that you don't want to sponsor the article, and they would have to then have a citizen petition sent to the selectmen, and the selectmen would decide whether or not it goes on the warrant. Either way, you got to hold a public hearing.
All right, I guess I'm still not clear what action we'd take tonight, other than, if you want to proceed with this, we'll have a public hearing, but I assume I'm not happy with the language, Joe. I mean, I
I could understand, but perhaps we
I just feel like.
schedule this for a public hearing, but in the interim, refine the language in such a fashion that it might be specific enough to appeal to the board.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if everyone else feels the same way, but I feel like there's some
I
nuances
think
here.
we're moving a little too quickly on this, quite frankly.
Well, I don't think I personally would feel like we were rushed to get it on the fall. I mean, if we wanted to target the spring, then that would give us time to figure out, again, all the issues. But,
Yeah, I think-
if you want to push it for the fall, then, we, I guess, have to have a public hearing on it, and,
Well, we did propose it in April, so it's been kicking around for a while.
First I heard of it was last week, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, again, I'm not really clear what action to take. I mean, I would certainly want to see different language, and then as to whether we sponsored it, I don't think I'd be ready to sponsor it in the fall. So it would have to be a citizen's petition at that point.
Jim, we're not forced, I mean, Mark, we're not forced to support it and put it on now. I mean, can we?
Well, we don't put it on the warrant. The Board of Selectmen put it on the warrant.
Right,
If there's a citizen petition, then I think we have to hold a public hearing on it.
But if we make a decision that we feel it's too soon to be doing this, and, you know, and that we're not ready to support it or hold a public hearing, I mean, it can be, they then have the right to go to the Board of Selectmen and deal with it that way. Is that correct?
No, I think we would have to have the public hearing, and Jim may correct me, but we would make a recommendation to support it, defeat it, or pass it over.
So if you, tonight, if you think it's too early and you're discouraging Joe from moving forward, he can still petition the selectmen.
Right.
To have it put on the warrant, and the selectmen will tell us to hold the public hearing. And it would appear on the warrant if they so choose, and the board would report at town meeting what they feel about this. And if your answer is, we don't have enough data to make up our mind, so we're not supporting the article at this time, then they have the choice of either withdrawing the article or going to town meeting without our support.
I just make the comment that I'm supportive of this. I don't think it's confusing at all, and I think with acceptable language, I would be happy to have a public hearing. I think in terms of just dealing with business, there's nothing to delay here. We can act on this with the proper language, and if we agree to support it or vote to reject it, then they can move on. But I don't understand why we would delay on this. With assuming between now and the public hearing, there were language presented that satisfied your questions, because I agree with that.
My biggest problem is, you know, I'd like to see language built into the bylaw that's protective of the citizens and people.
I think we
view
can make an effort
amenities.
to do that, but perhaps that's what our next mission should be, is perhaps work with Clear Channel and Jim and take what we can from the state regulations that help protect the town against the detriments that you're fearful of, and maybe we can build this language to at least have a more fulfilling discussion next time about it.
I think conceptually, you know, it's much easier for me to envision one additional billboard overlooking 495. My biggest concern was that we were going to get 5 or 10, or, you know, and so that, but I also want to make sure that it's facing 495. I don't know if we, you know, regulate the income or just leave that up to the Board of Selectmen. I want to protect view amenities. I want to worry about height. You know, there's a lot of nuances to it that I probably haven't even thought of that I think should be incorporated into this. Some maybe don't belong in the zoning and some maybe do. And I'd be curious to see if there's an example of zoning that's already been written, so we don't have to write, you know, we don't have to be the guinea pig on this. You know, and maybe get a look at another town's bylaw that already has this in place and see how that would fit the situation.
Yeah, I could look up Worcester's and get that, because Worcester currently allows digital since, I think, 2015.
Okay.
So they changed their bylaws to allow digital specifically.
All right. So again, just rather than reinventing the wheel on this, I'd like to, you know, maybe do some research towards that end, and then just build maybe you know, work with Jim at least and Fred to build a bylaw that's a little more robust and protective of the citizens.
I do have a question, actually 2 questions, and this is of Clear Channel. Does the state require you to adhere to any of the dimensional standards of the community?
I don't understand when you say dimensional.
Size of the billboard, height
Okay.
of the billboard.
Yeah, so they don't regulate height, that's up to the community, but they do dimension. So there's, like I said, the industry standards are 14 by 48, but we could go up to 1,200 square feet, which is a 20 by 60. So you can't go over, 1,200 square feet. But that's not to say, if you agree to 14 by 48 and we go to the state and say we want to make it 20 by 60, that doesn't trump the community. So whatever you agree to us, like I said, if you say it could only be 14 by 48, then the state allows 14 by 48.
So 14 by 48 is 672 square feet.
Yeah, that's what currently we have on Route 9 now.
Okay,
14
those are
48.
grandfathered billboards. I'm talking about a new sign. So when you propose a new sign, do you have to abide by the town's dimensional standards for signs? Because right now, 100 square feet would be the maximum size of a sign.
Right, so if you change the bylaws to allow digital billboards and said the maximum size is 14 by 48, then that's what we would propose.
Okay, so you're helping me understand that we need to have the dimensions in this.
Correct.
Okay,
And
so that's why I'm asking the question. So right now, if you don't add the dimensions to this amendment, you're going to be stuck with 100 square feet.
Right. And you could also say no billboard could be taller than, I'm just arbitrarily throwing this number out, but no taller than 80 feet, 70 feet, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's
State
30
doesn't
feet.
regulate. You could allow 100-foot billboard, I can go to the state, they'll approve it.
Yeah, I think it's 30 feet right now. So, I mean, you've got some things to think about. Second question is, why approval of the Board of Selectmen? I'm looking at my bylaws for signs here, and there's nothing about the selectmen approving signs.
Because perhaps your suggestion early on when we were working through this.
No,
No?
not me.
I'm sorry, Jim, could you repeat that?
Why the Board of Selectmen to approve the sign, since there's nothing in our zoning bylaw where the selectmen approve signs?
The other thing, you have a off-premises digital billboard sign. We might need to come up with a definition of that.
Yeah, and I'd like to know, you've defined what adjacent is to me, I guess. It's a parcel that's adjacent to Route 9. It means touching Route 9, not Route 9, touching the interstate highways. So,
I think, yeah, we worked on that definition.
okay.
So the bylaw change might include an additional definition, unless that's clear to everybody what an off-premise.
Well, I would like something in the bylaw that defines what adjacent is, because generally when we use the word abutting, and you have abutters to abutters, and adjacent would need to be defined, because I don't want it to be unclear. If it's only the parcels that touch the interstate right-of-way, that's clear. If it's, how near is near? I don't want to get into that discussion of people splitting hairs on what adjacent means, so.
Again, I think it's really the wording. Rather than adjacent, you could say parcels within a certain, feet of the interstate. The concept is a lot easier than the wording. And I've seen bylaws get bogged down on wording 100 times, and the way this is worded, it's gonna get destroyed at town meeting. So, because we're already destroying it here. So, no offense.
Is the bylaw change a prerequisite before any application can be made with the state?
Yes.
So we'd have to have acceptable language in the bylaw, have it changed past at town meeting before there'd even be a consideration of citing this, and you'd still have to apply to the state. So,
Correct.
yeah, so we're a couple of years out, best. I would just as soon, look to try to find acceptable language. And if it happens before the fall meeting, fine. If not, then it'll have to go to the spring. But the onus would be on the applicant, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not inconceivable that we could push it towards the fall, but I think it would take a lot of work between now and September. So, again, I'm not saying no. I'm just, I need to see a lot more on it before I can. Again, you can petition for a special for a public hearing and to get on the warrant, and we can hear it with this language, but I just feel like it needs a lot of work. So, Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You guys covered pretty much everything I was thinking about. The only thing that involvement for the select board may have been, and still would be, is that presently any electronic billboards, the computerized ones, whatever you call them, the town receives $10,000 annually to that. I don't know how that was instituted, and I'm not sure how that would be affected here. I would assume there would be a similar agreement, but I have no idea how that was generated, and Clear Channel, Clearview now pays that annually. So I think that was part of the select board interaction. I'm not really sure how.
Yeah, it wasn't a zoning bylaw. It probably was the previous agreement when there were Route 9 existing billboards. And you probably wanted the selectman's endorsement. Previous, when your billboards were approved, that was done with the town manager and the former building commissioner.
Correct.
Yeah, so I would just suggest that that type of language be in there somewhere. I would think the town would still want to gain benefit from each side of the billboard. So if it's a double-sided billboard, they'd actually get $20,000 annually.
Yes, but what we typically do, if, say, you did change the bylaws, or if they were already allowed in digital, in the community, we sign a separate, we call it a linkage fee, a linkage payment, or a development agreement with the town, and that outlines everything, like the PSA hours. We have to be cognizant of all the state rules, regulations, the linkage payment annually. If there was any signs we had to take down, all that stuff is memorialized in a separate agreement.
So I don't know how that gets instituted into this, I guess, procedurally. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the planning board would take the lead on those negotiations or if the Board of Selectmen would. That's something we'd have to probably.
I think the selectman probably in that case.
Yeah, I just throw that out there for
Where
consideration.
it's almost a contract negotiation, or it's almost like a pilot, in other words. So it feels like something the selectmen should be involved with and not, especially where it's an annual contract and potentially be renewable. And I feel like we're just, I don't know that we would want to get involved with that.
Yeah, so a question for Jim is, can a zoning bylaw specify subject to successful negotiation of a separate contract?
Sure, I was only questioning why the Board of Selectmen, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, the language makes the final approval of the sign up to the Board of Selectmen. Presumably part of their final approval would be
Maybe approval of a separate contract with the select.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's another step in the process, that the bylaw, if it says subject to the successful negotiation, the Board of Selectmen might not agree to the terms and conditions, and then that sort of nullifies everything. In other words, the zoning bylaw change simply allows the sign to be erected, right?
Well, allows the potential.
Allows the potential. And if there's a condition on that says it's subject to a successful negotiation of this contract, then.
Typically, it's not entered into any kind of bylaw, but what happens is, like I said, if, say, this community already allowed digital, we would meet with the town first, like the town manager, the city manager, the mayor's office, and because they signed that development agreement with us, they give their best support when it comes to going to zoning. That's how we word that. And then if we are successful with the new billboard, the town gets all those benefits. But it's not necessarily written into a bylaw.
Yeah, so
we tried to
need a lot
introduce.
more legalese.
Yeah, so I guess where we're at now, we've been at this for a while, and I think the short answer is we need a little bit more meat in the bylaw before we can consider supporting it. And I don't know if everyone else feels the same way.
That.
And,
I think,
if you could come back with either an example of another town or some enhanced language that covers a lot of the issues we brought up tonight and possibly some issues we haven't even thought of, then maybe we can have another viable discussion about moving it forward. I wouldn't be willing to sponsor the language that's written here, though. That'd be obviously, if we had to have a public hearing on this language, we would, but I don't know if I would sponsor this language.
All right, well, thank you for all the input tonight. We appreciate it.
Okay.
We'll be speaking to Jim
We should talk, yeah.
in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks.
Coming in.
I think we also need to, there's the definition of a public benefit. I mean, this language is a little too general, I think, and we may find ourselves in some serious situations unless there's more specific set out in it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
All right. We have a couple of appointments on the agenda, one to the CMRPC and one to the capital expenditures. I misplaced my agenda. Okay, yeah. I don't know, I think CMRPC was Pete. Are you willing to continue that? Okay, and then capital expenditures was Tim.
Substituting for Jim, do you want it back?
I go either way. I mean, I'm fine.
Two? Does it matter?
All right, well, Jim, why don't we, I will nominate, I make a motion to nominate Jim Ball as our representative to capital expenditures, because I think you're on a couple of committees already, and I'd like to split.
Fine with that.
I second
Now that
that.
I'll be, Tim had stepped in for me when I was.
Well, I've got a few more committees for you then, Jim. All right, we have a motion and a second for Jim Ball for capital expenditures. All those, any discussion? All those in favor? You can vote for yourself. Yes. Five, you vote 5-0 in favor of Jim Ball.
Second.
And I'll make a motion to appoint Peter Bouchard as the planning board representative to the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission.
Second.
I heard Hazel second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is 5-0 in favor of Pete.
One point of interest for Pete is CMRPC is still meeting remotely. So then, there should be a quarterly meeting coming up, probably the end of September. I'll let you know about it.
We'll meet before it.
Yes.
All right. Last item on the agenda is a master plan update. I will turn it over to Jim Robbins for that.
Thank you very much. So last Thursday, we had our last meeting of the Master Plan Advisory Committee. We had approximately 14 people in attendance, which was really good. That was a combination of both remote and in person. The committee had a presentation from Donnie from VHB. He presented the entire plan. For those of you that watched online or were there, you know that. And the plan was very well received. The document's excellent. I'm hoping you've had a chance to read it. I know a couple of you have. I certainly have. I gave my comments to Donnie yesterday. We met on the discussion of my comments today. He's going to add some more graphics and photos. Thank you, Hazel, for pictures of the farm animals. Thank you very much.
The real ones.
If anyone has a picture of the fountain right over here in the cemetery, I'd appreciate that. Otherwise, I'm going to have to probably take a good one on a good weather day, because I'd like to boost the cover shot of the memorial and the fountain, have a better picture, because the picture that we have currently doesn't really show the fountain that well. So I had a lot of comments about additional graphics and some comments that I will share with the board. I'll just send you my comments so you can see what I asked. I wanted to bring the plan in regard to some of the recent developments more up to date, which we have done.
Yeah, they all made sense. I saw them.
You saw them?
Yeah,
Thank you.
They all made sense.
Some dates to keep in mind. So now that the plan is final, on Thursday at the end of the day, it will go live on our town website. So that will begin the public comment period, which will extend till September 9th. On September 9th, we will have the last public hearing. So the plan will be presented by the Master Plan Advisory Committee and the consultant and VHB. We're going to talk about how that will be presented, but it will be presented live here in this room on September 9th, and that will go out on Westborough TV, and there will not be remote participation. It will be a live meeting. Other dates to keep in mind. There will be a joint meeting of the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen on September 21st. That will be an opportunity for the two boards to discuss the plan. So please, again, get up to speed, get up to speed on the plan so that we can discuss that with the Board of Selectmen. And then the Planning Board officially votes to adopt the plan. That can be done at that meeting after closer discussions with the Selectmen, or we can do it at our following Planning Board meeting, the first meeting in October, because at town meeting, the advisory committee will present the plan to town meeting only as an overview. There'll be no endorsement or vote on the plan by town meeting voters. It will be a presentation of the plan as adopted by the planning board. So that will be the third Monday in the month of October.
Now, Jim, that's important because if we look back on the minutes we're about to approve, in each one of them, when we've talked about the master plan, we've talked about the master plan being endorsed at town meetings. So I think it's very important that people understand that it's just going to be a presentation. It's not going to be an endorsement at the fall meeting.
Right. The last time that the planning board brought the plan to town meeting, the board asked for a vote of endorsement, but it has no effect. What's required by law is that the planning board adopt the plan. So even if the town meeting voted to or not to endorse the plan, it has no legal effect. So we're following the state law. And I talked to our neighbor community, Northborough, who recently finished their master plan and is now beginning the implementation phase. They did not bring the plan to town meeting. So what we did in 2003 was very unusual and not necessary to make the plan legal. So I would recommend that we just follow what's legally required and have a report out at town meeting by the Master Plan Advisory Committee saying, you know, here's the major chapters that we studied, here's the highlights of the plan. The plan was discussed at 4 public hearings. The plan was presented live on the Master Plan website for almost 2 years, and public comment was received and incorporated into the plan. And the Planning Board intends to follow the goals and actions in the implementation plan included in the master plan document. So thank you for your input.
I just wanted to note that the plan the meeting from last Thursday is available to view on the Westborough TV website, and I was hoping that, I don't know, if Kristen has the ability, or maybe we need to ask VHB to put a link to that video on the master plan website.
We can do that. We can do that.
Just, I think people are more likely to watch that presentation than they are to read the whole plan. I mean, no offense, it's a long document. I haven't finished it, so.
It's a very good document.
I think it'd be better off watching Donnie's presentation on it. And, you know, most people will get more out of that than they would out of, well, maybe not more, but they'll make the time for that, I think.
No, it makes sense.
The presentation was excellent as well, so, you know, it really detailed everything, so, yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys for all the work you've been doing on it. That's going to be time-consuming. Any other business, Jim?
No, just keep in mind September 9th is the next meeting. It's the last public hearing.
We do have a bunch of minutes, and I'm going to turn that over to Jim.
We have minutes that you've all had plenty of opportunity to review.
Can we do them in bulk form?
Excuse me?
Can we do them in bulk form?
I'm suggesting that we address these in one as a group from May 25th, 21, June 1, 21, June 15, 21, July 6, 21, and July 20, 21. I move that we approve those minutes as presented by Kristen.
I'll second that.
That was robust.
I heard Tim second.
I get that second. I read all those minutes today.
All right, any discussion on that motion?
You're a better reader than I am.
All those in favor? That is 5-0 to approve that motion and those minutes.
Thank you, sir.
So if there's no other business, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second that one.
I heard Hazel laugh. She's quick. All right. All those in favor? That's 5-0. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Thanks.
How do they?